So we have distinct honor of having some Elmira controllers here with us today. I think this is kind of an annual event. So Chelsea, why don't you come up? I'd like to introduce you. Oh, Austin's going to come up. Okay. So these are controllers from Elmira Tower. They called me a week or two ago. I think they got in contact with Dave first, but Charles, I talked to him, and I'm glad they reached out because these are folks we need to work with hand in hand, you know, day to day during our glider operations. And the smoother we can work with them, the smoother things go. So Austin, if you would introduce yourself and your team.
Yes, sir.
And
hi, my name is Austin. I'm talking a little too loud, I think. Back there, we got Chelsea, which you already just heard her name, and we got Justin. We're 3 controllers over at Elmira Tower. We appreciate you having us. Finally get to see some faces instead of just a green blot on the screen. As we were discussing with you earlier, pretty much COVID on our end isn't going to be affecting us. We're back to our normal operations. Should be open from sundown, correction, from sun up to sundown. Give us calls if you're before that when you're being active, and basically you know, everyone's been doing overall pretty well in regards to the LOA. Nothing too big to note on that. And just communication. If you ever have questions, if you're worried about, do I need to talk to us, talk to us. You know, we're not JFK. We have time usually to help out as much, and the more we know what y'all are doing, the more we can move around and keep everyone safe. I know during the summer, a lot of times we get survey crews that have to go through y'all's particular area. We like to have them monitor your frequency, but sometimes we like to give you all a call as well to let you know what's going through. And of course, you know, medevac helicopters will have to get in there to RNOT and whatnot. But if you guys ever have any questions, we always have someone by the phone up in the tower to answer. And once again, appreciate y'all having me and my 2 co-workers. And thanks for the snacks.
so questions.
The particular dates for that, I believe it opens back up May 1st. And it runs through November 30th, I believe. But we do have to, sometimes if it's not mowed out, we will have to close it back down. And that's weather permitting on that, but that will be noted out when you can listen to on the 8th frequency.
Any specific procedure you want to go through before downwind shortly than just downwind, or what?
Yeah, so I guess are you talking with when it's an emergency landing or for regular operations if you want to tow out?
Yeah,
regular operations. Yeah, give us a call as soon as you're planning on coming in so that we can get you properly in the downwind. Usually when you guys are active, we're keeping a downwind on the north side. Oh, I'm sorry, on the you guys don't all have radios.
Well, you would have to.
Yeah, they're due to be the ring walk, right?
There's 2 ways that we could do it. So let's say you want to use 523, and let's say you don't have any radios in the sail planes or anything like that. A lot of times what we'll get is we get pilots that don't have comms, that what they'll do is they'll call us on the power telephone. So as long as you have a power telephone and you want to coordinate something, then we can adjust the traffic flow and we can adjust and do things outside of that also. So if you don't have any comms in the glider, you want to come in and do a landing for 5 feet, we can practice that. Then you can always give us a call and then we can adjust the traffic accordingly.
But if we look at the screws right now, anybody showing up there without a call, they some type of arrangement. We have to show up.
For a normal day-to-day thing, yes. Obviously, if there's an emergency situation, our eyes are out the window or VFR now. So us and Elmira being the alternate field of landing, if you have to literally make an emergency landing in Elmira, we're always out the window anyway too. So if you have to, if you don't off-field landing, you have to emergency or something outside of normal occurrence, then yeah, for sure we're.
You can't just decide.
No, as far as like class B, as long as you establish 2-way radio communication.
And just I'll reiterate for that for the Zoom. I don't know if I could hear Justin. For the class Delta, we do have for regular operations, we do need to have 2-way communication established. Of course, in the emergency, we are looking up at the hill and we can see the wings rock and give you all the light gun which works fine. I don't know if anyone's never had a light gun shot at you, it lights up the whole cabin, it'll be fine. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Just for our normal operation, start, stop, what is your preferred method for us letting you know that we're starting or ending the operations up here? Phone or from the aircraft?
Phone or, for my personal preference, they're both recorded lines.
Yep, I do like the radio just because I don't have to answer the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, if we're busy, having to walk in the back and get the phone can be a little lot. So if you do have a radio and you're your first one starting out, you want to shout to us on 211, that definitely works. It's recorded. We got that good to go. And but if you call, same thing.
Same for the end of the day, right?
A firm, yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So we do have a contest here this year, Region 3 contest in July. So, you know, what do we expect? 30 plus gliders maybe for the contest? So it'll be a week-long event,
Okay.
and we'll make sure we talk to you ahead of time
Yes, sir.
and let you know the increased activity.
Yeah, just a heads up. Otherwise, it just looks like a bunch of hornets have been hit out. Like, okay, I guess there's a competition today.
Yeah.
Definitely any type of notification on that would be lovely.
Have either you three flown in a glider? Well, I'll extend an offer right now. So when you want to go fly, let me know.
I appreciate it.
Okay? So we can make that happen.
I'm a little scared, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no reason to be. None of these folks are.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So, okay, anything else, Austin?
No, just nice to meet y'all. And,
Yeah.
Once again, yeah, give us a call. We're always around during hours. Love to talk. Any questions at all? We're always able to answer.
Yeah, I mean, the 523 is a good idea. I mean, it's been a long time, I think, since we landed a glider down there. And maybe we'll coordinate something over the summer or some evening or something, maybe where we can put, half a dozen gliders down there and take them off and practice. Because, I mean, we tell people that's where we're going to go in emergency. And,
Yeah,
Honestly, it'd be good practice for us too.
100%.
yeah, all right,
A lot of theory on both ends. So,
really.
yeah, anything like that, just
All right,
with coordination, anything. We have a saying in our field that anything's possible with coordination. So
Yep.
that's what we like to do.
good. Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir.
Yep. All right. Yeah, just Mike's going to switch us over here to a little pitch.
This was your PDF you wanted? This?
Yep.
This isn't actually a PowerPoint. You sent me a PDF.
I know. Will it work?
It'll be, I gotta redo the window size. Tell you what. Here. Sorry, this is it's close.
So while Mike's getting this up, so March 19th today, obviously, the New England Fast Team, Boston group, I guess, is presenting glider accidents and incidents starting Monday, March 21st. And they're kind of the group that gathers all this information together to present to the glider community as a whole. Unfortunately, we're like 2 days early before that actual presentation is out. I would encourage everyone or anyone, if you have time to view, it's an hour and 45 minutes, and that's just part one. And there's 3 parts to this presentation, but obviously it's in depth, and they go through most of the accidents and incidents in 2021. This briefing I obtained is from the Soaring Safety Foundation. It is what they're teaching to instructors now for FERCs. And it talks about 2021 incidents and accidents, but I think of the 22 or 23 accidents and incidents in 2021, they don't have any data on 11 of them. So it's basically folks, they say, well, we have 2 years to put this information together, and they're going to take all 2 years to put that information together. So I think there's going to be some of you out here in the audience who have some knowledge as to some of these accidents and incidents that they have no data on, and I'm hoping you share that. So.
Right and left the arrow keys, or just like slides?
All
And
right.
the Zoom people would like it if they could see you.
Oh, okay, got it.
They don't like looking at them like, wow.
So the title of this slide is how flight instructors can directly contribute to aviation safety. Well, I will contend that all of you out there contribute to flying safety, and we're all safety officers, and it's not just me, it's not just Haven, tow pilot, it's not just Noah, it's all of us who contribute to safety, and that's kind of the way I'd like you to look at it. And certainly on any of these slides, if you have something to contribute, please do. Jake? Contribute. Don't need to be. Okay, with any FERC, you have to have objectives, but for instructors, we're supposed to become more familiar. You'll see these general aviation accidents, including low altitude maneuvering and loss of control of the aircraft. You're going to see shortly that contributes to most of the accidents and incidents that occurred in 2021. We should be more effectively instruct after having learned all this, to include risk management skills, and then emphasis on our instructors' roles. We're instructors, we're not the be all end all, to this aviation club. We just contribute, we're just a small part of keeping this thing together. And it takes all of you to keep it together. Where's the data come from? The Safety Foundation, they gather all this information from these different groups. They talk about the General Aviation Joint Steering Committee. I don't know if you can see those bullets down there at the bottom, but they have a topic a month that they cover from a safety perspective. And so if you're looking for things, there's just a wealth of knowledge out there, whether it's a Safety Foundation or the FAA or Wings or this JSC group. The information is out there if you so choose to go find it. It's for general aviation. We're part of general aviation. We just don't happen to have a motor or engine in our aircraft. But you notice the working groups, loss of control in flight. Well, that's the #1 working group because that happens to be where most of the accidents and incidents happen to be occurring. And then they talk about system component failure, power plant, obviously the engine, controlled flight into terrain. Controlled flight into terrain. So I had the distinct honor of flying down at Perry last year, and I think 65 sailplanes take off in a matter of about 30 to 45 minutes down there, basically all at once. And some of the top glider pilots, if not the US, the world, flying in this event. And I think the very first day, we had one glider that basically crashed 2 miles off the end of the runway. And it happened to be a very experienced contest pilot who basically tried to ride a thermal all the way down to the ground. And he realized he had to land, but he didn't have a whole lot of places to put it down in, and ended up into this field. And sure enough, there's a wire there and tore off the tail of the sailplane. So it can happen. And then I can't remember, second or third day, essentially the same thing happened. Big takeoff, everyone's getting airborne, and one of the newer contest pilots trying to catch a thermal off 2 miles off the end of the runway. And again, basically thermaled right into the pine trees. And there's a point there where, we teach 2,000 feet, you got to find a place you should be looking at a place to land. And by 1,000 feet, you should certainly have a place picked out. And those two folks, it was controlled flight into terrain, basically. So kind of a I had to look at this curve for about 10 minutes to find out what was going on, but if you look at it, it's basically general aviation accidents over the last 10 years, and you'll see that loss of control is the number one item down there, and 47% of the accidents were loss of control over a 10-year period in general aviation. The next one, I think, is controlled flight into terrain. The next one is a power plant, basically a engine issue. And then I can't see what the fourth one is, but it goes right on down the list to where it contributes to 100%. But the point is loss of control and controlled flight into terrain makes up greater than 50% of the accidents in general aviation over the last 10 years. They talk about a null report. This is a monthly report that goes out. It's a 30-day rolling average. If you're the safety person for American Airlines or something, I'm sure you probably have to read the null report and make sure you're current on all those things. But I don't know, Heinz is shaking his head no. But this is to keep everybody up to speed on basically aviation incidents and accidents. Part 830, everyone's aware of that in the FAR. We have to cover it in FERCs and then safety publications. So number of soaring accidents. Good news, I guess, number of accidents going down. Okay. They don't talk to whether that's because the number of soaring pilots is decreasing every year. Are we having less accidents because we're flying less? Or are we having less accidents because we're doing things better? But the good news is, I guess the trend is down. On fatal accidents, unfortunately, it looks like a pretty steady line there all the way across for the last 10 years. I think the jury's still out on 2021. It was only 2 fatal accidents. I think they'll end up assigning more, but good news, only 2 fatal accidents. The year prior was 8. Okay. I'll let you look at this for a minute. This is general aviation fixed wing versus commercial fixed wing versus gliders. Obviously, general aviation, a whole lot more airplanes out there flying than gliders. So a lot more accidents, but they fly between 5 and 6 times more hours than gliders do as a whole. I suspect frustrating to the FAA and the NTSB is that the number of accidents in the big scheme of things seems to be pretty constant from 2014 to 2019. It's kind of up and down, but the total number is roughly the same. And the fatal accidents, that doesn't seem to be going down either. With a lot of work by the FAA and NTSB, working towards accident prevention and certainly fatal accidents, but they're still probably way higher than we like them to see them. Good news on gliders. 2019, 15 accidents. Some of us might argue there may be glider incidents out there that go unreported. They only know what gets reported. So could be more. Kind of tough charts to read. It's basically a graph of 9 fatal accidents, both fixed wing and gliders. 1,000 total accidents in general aviation, for which gliders contribute around 20 to 25. On the right is accidents per 100,000. Well, big glider area there in blue, but it's because of we have accidents, but when we fly 1/6 to 1/7 the number of hours of general aviation, then the accidents we do have contribute greatly per flying hour. Fatal accident comparison. Again, rates. Gliders are high because of the number of hours we fly. But a fatal accident is a fatal accident. So That's what we're trying to negate. Fatal accident comparison, again, like the other charts, higher in gliders because of the number of hours we fly. So I don't know, does Harris Hill, do we submit to Soaring Safety Foundation the number of hours we fly here? I don't know the answer. I mean, how do they get our numbers? We do? Oh, I did not know that. Yeah, thank you, Rob. So do you just, you just report, Joni, the total number of hours in sorties, or how do you report it? Okay. What time of year do you submit that? Spring? Okay. Well, good. The operations officer probably ought to know that. No, you're doing a good job. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to get into sortie accidents by category, and they break it out by, PT3, premature termination of tow. Okay, that's PT3. FF, I think, is basically in flight, and then they have landing, and then they have other. So you'll see percent of accidents by category. So 50% unknown. I told you, of the 22 incidents in 2021, the FAA has no data on 11 of them. So that's basically the 50% unknown. But in the other categories, as far as, premature termination of tow or during flight or landing, roughly same number of accidents per category. And then you look at fatal accidents over there, and almost a quarter, 25, 25, 25, 25, although there were really only, although this 2016 to 2021. So basically 25% of the fatal accidents occurred in each of those categories. So where to focus? Total accidents, address landing accidents and their causes. Oftentimes, this is the controlled flight into terrain. I suspect those two incidents at Perry last spring were landing accidents. Okay, they both tried to land, I guess, in some semblance, although the one into the pine trees might have been controlled flight into terrain, but certainly the pilot trying to land and took off his tail. And you're fixing that sailplane, aren't you, Heinz? I was thinking that sailplane was in your no? Okay. Ah, okay. And then as instructors, goal-oriented approach to improve pilot flexibility and decision-making skills. And we're going to talk a little bit about aeronautical decision-making and risk management, but this is where the FAA wants to go. They'd rather not see us give a flight review every 2 years, and that be, the only training you get. They'd like to see continuous training. They'd like to see us talking about risk management, monthly, if we could. They'd like to see us talk about aerospace decision-making monthly, or, this is what we need to do. And maybe we'll have more meetings like this during the summer, because to do this just once a year before we've all even turned a wheel out there on the gliders kind of seems ridiculous in a way. Hopefully some of you are going to have takeaways. But the idea is we do a little bit of this, all the way through the season, certainly on flight reviews. And then the focus on fatal accidents. I talked about low altitude maneuvering accidents and their causes. And then the community is still, accepting approval of risky maneuvers like low altitude saves. We're pretty lucky here at Harris Hill because we really get two chances to land. If you come back to Harris Hill and kind of screw up the approach, then we can go to the Ox Field. We can go to the Elmira airport. But a lot of folks around don't have that opportunity. In my past glider club, we would kind of on a routine basis see people get very close to the airfield and try to save it, down a couple 100 feet, 200, 300, 400 feet. And then if they couldn't see it, they'd duck into the inland. And obviously we tried to discourage that, but you kind of knew who it was going to get themselves in trouble eventually. And I remember one 126 pilot who had his own 126, and this took 3 years. I think it was over a 3-year period, but each year you'd see him come back and he'd be a little bit lower and a little bit lower, trying to save it right there at the end. And then he'd duck in at about 200 feet and land. Well, that third year, he was 2 miles off the end of the runway at about 200 feet, and he didn't save it. And into the pine trees he went. And good news is he walked away from it, but you could tell it was an accident waiting to happen. He just got more and more comfortable of getting lower and lower, trying to save it. And people talked to him. People tried to warn him that you're getting too comfortable down there. You need to have that altitude, 1,000 feet. You need to be looking to land. Okay, more charts, basically soaring accidents in the different areas by color code. Look pretty consistent over the years down there in the lower right. So a premature termination of tow, non-fatal, you'll see the numbers on the left-hand side. Fatal, we did have one in 2021. I think the next slide talks to that. During flight, there was a fatal accident, or non-fatal, excuse me. No fatals in landing or during flight. And then you'll see the totals at the end, but lots of unknowns, 11 unknowns. I guess next year we'll cover those. Launch accidents by year. Basically 2 non-fatal in 2021 and 1 fatal. Here are the incidents. And some of you may, I'm sure, have more knowledge on these incidents than I have, but the first one, the mini Nimbus glider impacted a parked truck after veering off runway during launch. Was that during seniors? Anybody know that? Wasn't there an accident at the senior contest where an aircraft veered off the runway and hit a truck? Yeah, I think that incident occurred at the seniors contest down in Florida. Glider stall spun while attempting to return to the runway following a winch cable break about 800 feet. This is non-fatal. The 135 though was fatal. Basically a stall spun while attempting to return to the runway after releasing between 100 to 200 feet AGL for unknown reasons. So was it a rope break? You think they might know that, but maybe he just released. I don't know. We don't know. And then lastly, the 304 there, pilot lost control and released about 300 feet AGL after the elevator push rod failed due to corrosion. So, I would hope he had a current annual, but somebody missed something somewhere there. Okay, basically release reasons on the premature release on tow, shows planned, unplanned. This is why we practice, simulated rope breaks, so you feel confident to return back to the field. Here's accidents in flight for the years 17 through 21. 1 non-fatal incident. And I hadn't really heard about this mid-air collision, but both pilots parachuted to safety. Does anybody have anything to add on that accident? Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't heard something about that. And then landing accidents, 17 through 21, we had one landing accident, non-fatal. LaBelle glider struck a tree on final during off airport landing. Okay. Blanick glider landed hard and veered off the left side of the runway, striking a runway light and drainage culvert. 304 again, right wing struck tree during off-port landing roll. And then the 135. Pilot lost side of the runway on the base to final turn, resulting in an off-field airport landing. Okay, unknown causes. Again, 11. One fatal, looks like. And then here's the list. If anyone knows anything about any of these incidents, please speak up. But it gives a list of the type of sailplanes involved. You notice a couple of 233s, even a 126. This is all in 21. That's correct. We don't have any information, Jamie, on these incidents, accidents. Yeah.
Are these all injuries to anyone? Because there was an accident of the 233 and 126. Because of a windstorm, one glider over into another glider.
No, I don't think these are all injuries. These are accidents, incidents. May or may not have had an injury involved to the pilot.
Because there was 233 and 126 that were both damaged because of a windstorm.
Okay. Do you where?
I'm just saying, it's two ships that were damaged. I don't know if it would be in this or not.
Yeah, I think Jake has a point. I think it's either got to be during takeoff, in flight, or landing. Really, if it's just two sailplanes parked, then a windstorm comes up and blows them away, I'm not sure they get reported. Yeah, intent to fly, right? So kind of near and dear to us, we're just getting going here towards the end of March, but you'll notice that the incidents occurred in June. Probably, clubs just getting going. A lot of folks hadn't flown much. So, we're pushing. Everyone will fly with an instructor, your first flight of the year here. So we hope to start first weekend in April and have plenty of instructors involved. So those of you that want to get going, we can get you going. So fatal accidents, 2002 to 21, long time span. You notice in this case, most of the fatal accidents occurred in launch. Might have been rope break, stall, spin right after takeoff. So accident prevention techniques. This is one technique right here. We all get together to talk about accidents and incidents and how we can prevent them. And as I mentioned earlier, we're all safety officers in one form or another. We all have something to contribute, whether you're the brand new person and you have one flight under your belt, or you're the old head here and you have 8,000 flights. But we all have something to contribute. Sean's going to give a little pitch later on aeronautical decision-making skills. It's going to be quick and dirty, but that's what we need to work on, as well as risk management skills. And then both the Soaring Safety Foundation and the FAA are pushing scenario-based training. We come up with, scenarios where you're in this position, you're this far away from the field, you're at this altitude, you know, the winds are such and such, you're in a 233, what are you going to do? And then we talk through it and what are the options? And that's kind of, you as the pilot, those are the things you need to be thinking about. And then a plug for instructors at the end there. So many of us come up here on weekends, you know, we just got done doing whatever it was, we're rushed. We come up here, we feel like we got to hurry. We don't plan exactly the way we should plan. We assume the weather's good, other people have flown, I can do it. And maybe not, you know, that might be the time to tell yourself, hey, slow down. I need to go check the weather myself. I need to wind my watch. I need to sit down, decide what it is I'm going to do flying today, and don't assume anything. And then this structured, uninterrupted preparation, good idea. That quiet time right before you go fly to get your head in the right spot. What am I going to go do here? You know, today could be the day I'm just going to go out there and kill myself. And I'm quoting Frank Reed from Bermuda High, who used to claims, he told me, he said, every day I would tell myself, I just might be stupid enough to kill myself today. So it saved him. Here's references from the pitch, and I think that's it. So a little rundown on accidents and incidents in 2021. So. I think I had you up next, and then we're going to take a break. Yep.
All right. All right. Okay, so in contrast to Joe's very data-driven presentation, mine is more of a personal view. Joe asked me to give a talk based on my first year, really first few months experience here. And so my name is Mike Goldstein, for those of you who haven't met yet. I started flying on August 9th. By September 19th, I'd soloed, and by the end of the flying season, I had something like 92 flights. I plan to start this season with the written exam and a check ride. So things were moving along really nicely, and I wanted to talk about how I learned how to learn to fly and how we do that safely. Because your approach to learning how to fly can make you a more dangerous person, and it can make you a safer person, depending on the approach you take. Learning how to fly, especially in a club setting, brings a set of specific challenges, a set of unusual challenges, and can actually create more unpredictable situations, more variability among individuals than you would see in a more of a flight school kind of a situation. So you might be thinking, so the challenges that learning in a club bring, and again, this is my personal take on this from talking to some of you and what my experience is like. There's no timetable to learn how to fly, right? And it might take you 2 months and it might take you 2 years. It just depends on the individual. There's no formal curriculum. It's really up to you to create your curriculum, and we'll be talking about that. There's no accountability for meeting your goals. No one's going to tell you to make goals. And there's different kinds of goals you might have, and we'll get into that. And it's easy to just hang around. And hanging around is actually a good reason to be at Harris Hill. It's also a social kind of place, but it's easy to just do lots of hanging around and occasionally get in a glider. And I'm going to argue that'll actually make you a more dangerous person in the sky. And so, yeah, we have lots of nice social scenes, lots of informal teaching. You got Jake down here explaining in great detail something. We're not sure what. And I think Olivia's asleep and Roy's head hurts. You might be thinking like, okay, so what? Why does it matter if I'm a student for years, or if I only fly once a month, or if I only fly in just the easiest, most docile of conditions? And the reason is that learning to fly is a very complex perceptual motor task. It's not unlike skiing in some ways, and it's easy for those skills to degrade. Subtle aspects of visual and motor coordination. It's very easy for those to degrade without you being aware of it, in small ways that can add up to big mistakes in the sky. Even regular but simple repetitive practice won't improve that necessarily. So back to the skiing analogy, it's really easy to stay on the bunny slope. You do snowplow turns all day. You could just stay there. The problem isn't gliding. Flying around with low levels of competence will feel perfectly fine until the moment when it doesn't. Okay, you can get killed on the bunny slope here, because bunny slope's a couple thousand feet up, which can turn into a couple hundred feet up, which, as Joe has pointed out, can turn into pine trees. So one of the challenges of learning to fly in a club setting is that you can create your own learning plateaus, and getting stuck on a learning plateau of your own making is actually a pretty dangerous place to be. And so the question comes up then, how does successful yet unsupervised learning actually work? And it turns out there's lessons to be had along those lines from my own particular area of expertise, which is studying development of brains, and namely the way that young organisms, babies, learn how to learn things. So there's something really interesting that happens with infants who are learning about language, about motor skills, and about perceptual skills like judging depth at rates far, far faster than adults can do. And they're doing it without structured formal teaching. So what's going on here? You have a behavior that's known as scaffolding. So for example, you got a mom and a baby here. Let's say they're playing with a picture book. She's got a little something on the ground. She's showing the baby. When that baby is a 9-month-old, like you see here, what mom's going to do is label what the baby's looking at. All right. She's going to see where the infant's looking. She's going to say, oh, that's a bear. And, and baby's going to look to one side. Oh, that's a balloon and it's red. She's going to fill in all that information. But if that baby was 24 months old, if that baby was a 2-year-old, she wouldn't do any of that. She'd be doing what are called WH questions. What's this? Where's the bear? What color is that? So what's happening is that the parent assesses the cognitive competence of the baby, and she increases the level of complexity of the interaction, of the kinds of questions she asks, just enough to challenge the baby. Okay. Now, babies are very good. This is another baby in my lab. My favorite kind of baby is a highly instrumented baby, wearing a wireless eye tracker, one of only 2 in the world. But the point is that babies, why does this scaffolding work for babies? It works because babies are very, very good at allocating their attention to events of intermediate complexity. If an event is too noisy or random, babies will look away. They figure that out very quickly. If an event is too boring, too predictable, they will also look away. They focus on events that they haven't exactly quite mastered yet, but they're learning something about. That's why peekaboo works so well. You try playing peekaboo like a robot. Peekaboo, peekaboo, peekaboo. Right. Baby's going to tune right out. You're too predictable. So you introduce a little unpredictability and it holds their attention. Okay. So babies can learn in unsupervised ways very effectively because their brains are set up to tune into semi-predictable situations that they can learn from. It turns out, though, that adults are very, very bad at this. Okay? We are clueless. We have to make that process that's an intuitive, totally intuitive to an infant. We have to make it explicit and intentional for it to work for us. So that's basically what I did in my approach to Harris Hill. And that allowed me to learn reasonably quickly. So my version of what was going on in a baby's head was I needed to identify what I needed to learn. This is why I call it learning how to learn. I needed to identify what needed to be learned. I challenged myself appropriately. When I figured I had a skill down, I would always focus on the stuff, not the impossible stuff, but the stuff that I was starting to master, that I wasn't quite there yet. That's what required my attention. And then I had to build a memory of those learned skills, because the things we're learning early on, as David's pointed out, are very perishable. It takes a long time to get that perceptual motor detail into our bodies and into our brains. So that's one of the reasons we're going into a dangerous time of year, because those of us who are just picking this up, especially those of us who were just picking this up last year, because we've lost quite a bit, whether we're aware of it or not. And you want to be aware of what you need to do while you're still on the ground, not when you're suddenly doing PIOs on the tow rope, okay, where you weren't doing PIOs before. So the way I start with this kind of idea is I ask, what's your flight plan for learning? What kind of achievements are you looking for? And these are, of course, going to change over time. So in my case, I actually was writing this down. I said, I need to learn flying skills. I need to learn aeronautical knowledge. I'm going to need to learn what the hell am I supposed to be doing at the club, besides not getting run over by golf carts, which was day one. And you know who was who there over at the kids' table. And there's also a social aspect of this. And at the club, the social aspect is absolutely tied into instruction. I still firmly feel that each of our flight instructors should have a chip implanted, just like we do with pets. And we have a detector, okay? And so we could use our phones and actually geolocate the nearest instructor, go right to them, and we're good to fly. But it doesn't work that way. And so you have to get to know people to figure out who the instructors are, build some relationships, and go fly. I was actually, well, we'll get to it. So these were the articulated skills that I laid out that I knew I was going to need to work on. And so then the question is, how do you use this to get to the next level of competence? And by that, I don't mean the big milestones like passing the check ride. We tend to focus on the big, when am I taking the written, when am I taking the check ride? But in between those kinds of things, and every year after you finally get your license, there's all these little things, all these smaller steps, like being comfortable when you're landing without reference to an altimeter, or making thermaling turns effectively with just enough top aileron to not feel like you're going to fall out of the sky. Feeling comfortable on tow when the air is really turbulent. So by paying attention to the things that you haven't quite mastered yet is going to make you a better pilot. And going into this year, you might have been good at, like, bouncing all over the sky on tow and feeling comfortable. You're going to be a little less comfortable the first time that happens this spring. And you just need to be ready to be uncomfortable so you don't overreact to that situation. So by paying attention to things you haven't quite mastered yet, you'll be a safer pilot. I found personally that as I was learning, it was easy to get caught up in the moment-to-moment actions of flying. And then what I had to learn to do was, when I got back down on the ground, there's always a debrief with the instructor, but I needed to have a debrief with me. Okay, I needed to consolidate those memories somehow so I could progress. And the way I did it was, these are my notes. This is August 11th, so this is like 2 days into flying. And I was just writing down, okay, we talked about the standard pattern. Here's like altitudes we need to, AGL, and that we need to be at as we coming in. I had a couple of questions about that. I just started writing down north landings, which at that time was a purely conceptual sort of abstract sort of concept. And, here's the next day on the 12th. The way I was starting to do, I figured this out between the 11th and the 12th. What I need to do is not just start on writing the debrief information from the instructor, which is lots of facts. What I needed to write down was what I refer to as, I needed to write down things I needed to know next. So both those things need to happen. And so I was starting to write down, here's this stuff about slips, stuff about takeoff, some notes about stalls. These are all facts. These are all things that are on the checklist of things to learn. But this isn't going to help me next time. This is just a bunch of words. What was going to help me next time was stuff like this. So now we're getting a little later in the month. And I was doing what I call replay, then reconstruct each flight. In other words, what happened and what do I need to do differently next time? So here's my replay of a flight on the 13th. So I started on the 9th. There were a few days in now. We did a takeoff. We did tow. We did some forward and turning stalls. We did crosswind landing. We did some side slips and turning slips and some forward slips. That's over, like 3 flights that day. We didn't do all that stuff in one flight. But the key is this: what would I do differently? What's the reconstruction? If I had to do those flights again, what would I do differently? And on tow, I got to make smaller movements. I'm jerking the stick around too much. I need to keep the line tensioned. I can't quite read my own writing from here. But in other words, I was letting the line get a little slack and then tension. You know what that's like. You get kind of jerked around. I needed to keep things smaller and just in more of a steady state on the tow. And also I needed on stalls, I needed to practice turning stalls more. I felt that. Gentle climb, stay coordinated, and don't overbank. I was overbanking in my turning stalls. Okay. And so now my litmus test really was not just can I articulate what happened, but how do I consolidate that and decide what I'm going to do for the next time I'm up? Okay. So I wasn't passive about this. It wasn't just like waiting for the instructor to tell me what I need to do next time. It might even be a different instructor. I had a log for myself of what I needed to do next time. So you got to create your own curriculum for learning. All right. Babies are good at it. We're bad at it. You got to explicitly articulate your micro goals here from flight to flight, from day to day to make this work. So what I learned to do, my litmus test was, could I explain to someone else an idea or a maneuver? That's my usual litmus test for things, and that worked really well for these kinds of concepts. So again, I wound up after doing this a bit, I started setting a weekly schedule. What do I want to get done this week? And that's what I'm going to be doing this flying season too. I'll have a weekly schedule, maybe a monthly one of where I want to be. And again, it's identifying the skills you want to build. It's challenging yourself appropriately. The stuff you're still somewhat uncomfortable with is what you really need to be focusing on. And then building that memory of learned skills. Along with flying skills, I tried to integrate aeronautical knowledge. I think, again, in a club setting, it is very easy to focus 100% on flying skills. And then once you solo, all of a sudden you go, holy shit, I got book work to do. I got to get ready for the written. And there's this massive shifting of gears. Personally, I don't learn well like that. And I've seen other people struggle with that. I really think you got to integrate the aeronautical knowledge with the flying skill. So what I did is I started talking to people. I made a list of books to get and got them. By the way, if the Understanding the Sky, you can't really find that in print. I've got the PDF, and I'm happy to send that to anyone who wants it. And you just take it to a print shop. You can just print it out and get it bound for like $5, and it's great. And so I just started reading them. So when the learning program's informal, like it is as a club, it is your responsibility to create your own structure. And that's true for the knowledge as well for the flying skills. You have to take the initiative. You have to be an active learner. So I found that the Holtz books were probably the most useful at the beginning. That's the one we're using to organize the ground school. Again, I had my own little syllabus I made for myself. I knew I'd have to learn about weather. I knew I'd have to learn about how airplanes work. And I knew I'd have to learn how to control airplanes. And what I have been finding, again, personal experience, is that the book work, the aeronautical knowledge, has a real synergistic relationship when you're learning your basic flying skills. They really do inform each other. You know, the book work is not abstract. It's embodied. It's right there in the airplane if you can go back and forth between the books and flying. For me, that reinforced knowledge of both. I really think they need to be integrated to promote safe flying skills. The book work, and this is really important, the book work is actually not about studying for the written test at all. It's about learning how to fly safely. And that is really important. And here's an example. All right. And I'm using someone else here because I didn't have a picture of myself landing strangely, so I just used one from Snowbird. So apologies to McMaster there. But what I was doing, I had some days, I was really, you know, Joe was talking about someone who would come in lower and lower. I had this weird habit. I was coming in higher and higher, okay? And I was coming in too high and landing long. And I wasn't sure why. So it, you know, everything would look good in the pattern. I'd be at the right place on my downwind. But all of a sudden, I was too high and I had to slip to get down. And Dave pointed out, like, dude, if you're slipping all the time, you're making a mistake. You shouldn't have to do that. And so I tried to deal with that by doing the opposite of everything of what I just told you about. I tried to just do a whole boatload of landings. And it all kept coming out the same way. Downwind looked good. Base started to look high. I turned finally, I'm really high. And I'm slipping. And I'm like, God, I'm learning how to slip nicely, but this is really not the goal here. I was really frustrated. I actually did 8 flights in one day. Every single landing was too high and too long. I was really pissed off. And I'd forgotten my own flight plan for learning is what happened. I needed to step back and figure out what is the skill that I'm missing. So landing itself is not a skill. It is an outcome. A successful landing is an outcome of a whole bunch of skills working together to get you on the ground in the right place. So what skill was I missing? And what I realized was that I had to train my eyes to see glide slopes. I had not read my NAF book closely enough. And there is a section in there called TLAR. That looks about right. And he's got this amazing exercise in there about placing flags on the ground. You work out your ratios, but you can pace it out. It's reasonably accurate. And I would place on the ground flags indicating if I'm looking, if I'm standing, given my height, what's a 5-to-1 angle to intersect the ground? What's a 12-to-1 angle? What's a 20-to-1 angle? And I just planted these in my backyard. Actually, I planted in my front yard. My neighbors think I'm very strange. And I'd walk back and forth. I'm looking over I'm flying my downwind. I'm looking over. When do I turn my base? Is this the right place? And then, you know, I would only have my landing flag in after a while, and I would make a turn, and then I would measure it. Did I turn in the right place? And you know what? I was turning too soon, and I was coming in high. And I just had to train my eyes to see the 12-to-1 glide slope, okay? Because I'd always been coming in something closer to a 5-to-1. And that worked. I did it out here a few times, and all of a sudden, the next weekend out here, I was sticking my landings, okay? I'd learned to see the glide slopes. Instead of repeating a bad habit over and over, I had to figure out how to learn what I needed to learn. So I figured out the underlying skill I needed to practice. And by the way, I'd never felt so isolated here as when I was trying to figure that out. I just felt like I was an idiot. Everybody else seems to know what they're doing. I don't know how to approach this. And I forgot who, I think it was John, who said something like, look up the TLAR stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, what's that? You know, and I went and looked it up, and that made all the difference in the world. So if I would have learned faster if I talked to people, and I encourage you guys to do that. I encourage this with my graduate students and undergrads. The one time they never want to talk to anyone is when something's screwed up, and it's exactly when they should be talking to someone. All right, so take that to heart. At Harris Hill, flying is highly social, or it can be if you want it to be. You know, I really owe a big thanks to the juniors who kind of like let me learn from them when I first got here. On day one, Olivia was like, okay, Mike, let's teach you how to roll gliders around. You know, here's the white line in the hangar. Here's how we do this. And from there to they taught me how to do stuff online. You know, I actually think at the club, we'd start everybody new on cash and then move them out to the flight line. I actually think working cash is hard, because you got to deal with people in the public, and they're coming at you in all sorts of different ways, and it can be quite stressful, especially when you're not familiar with flight operations yet. You start on the line, it's hands-on, you do the soaring safety wing runner course, and you figure out the flow of things and how things work. I think it's a better place to start personally, and then you move people into cash. Okay, so there's a lot you can learn from each other here at the club, and people need to take advantage of that more. Again, not just when you're feeling good. It's the days when things aren't going that well. That's when you need to be talking to each other. So I encourage you to reach out to each other with your questions. Even practicing your answers when someone asks you something will actually help you learn. So to wrap up, like a baby, try to pay attention to the things that need more attention. Pay attention to what needs attention. Be an active learner and not a passive one. So to learn to fly safely, you've got to create your own curriculum for learning. You need to accurately assess the state of your knowledge. You do that by externalizing your knowledge. I was doing that in a journal. You can go back and look at it. You're creating your own memory. You identify the skills you need to build. You challenge yourself appropriately. You self-scaffold, and you build a memory of those skills. Babies can do this intuitively. You have to do it intentionally. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, Q&A. Uh-oh.
Can we get a picture of you in the 126 with the probes all over you? Just a little bit better than child probe.
Those are baby size. I wouldn't actually even fit on my head. And
We'll make you.
you know, yeah, if you want to make some adult ones, I do have an EEG set up for adults, so we have that. Yes.
Could we benefit from maybe putting out, and actually, we had that 12-to-1, 20-to-1. Could we build, maybe just a chalk line or a graph? Actually duplicate what you did there, and might be a good way to help people.
Yeah, except you can't build a standard one because it has to be relative to your eye height over the ground. So each person needs to just make one, but it takes 2 minutes. I think if we just had, I was using the parking cones when I was here, but you can get a bunch of, and a Frisbee to indicate the ground point. So you can do it in a matter of minutes. You can just pace it off. And it was super helpful. Actually, for me, I was really lucky because 12-to-1 is exactly the length of the concrete pad in front of the flight center, the deck. But yeah, we could just set it up. I think this should be a regular exercise for new pilots. It's super helpful. Other questions? Okay, who's next on the agenda? Okay, Patrick. Where's it? Get this out of the way. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, you know, that might be easier, but I'll leave this up if you want it. And let me know if you need a hand when it comes time for yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna use
Oh, yeah. Here you go, flip on.
All right. Good job.
And Zoom people like it when you stay in here so they can
Stay in the zone. All right. Is this thing on? All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Parks. I think most of you know me, probably at least seen my emails. I do the duty schedule for the club. I'm a board member for the club, and I'm also a tow pilot. So a lot of talk about gliders and what they should be doing, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the perspective from the rear view mirrors. So what does tow pilots feel with you guys behind us? All right. What's that? My rear view mirror. What's behind me? All right, so Joe touched on this a little bit before. It all starts on the ground. So this is an acronym that I think most of you know or should be learning about. This is that pause, making sure that you're worthy of making the flight, going through all those different aspects and giving yourself a checkout. Radios are kind of a funny thing around here. We have several nice ones that are handheld you can take with you. Grab one, tune it to the Harris Hill frequency and check it, either with another handheld or just give a quick call to the tow pilot. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, just can you hear me? Yes or no? So a safety pause. So I started doing this, I think, last year. Before we start a shift, just kind of doing a timeout with the commercial folks and saying, okay, what's the conditions? What direction are we going to go today? What are the emergency actions that we're going to take if we're on takeoff roll, the engine quits, which way are you going, which way am I going? Face to face is best, but again, if you're just showing up and you're getting in the queue, do a radio call and just see what's going on. So this one, when we get kind of busy, I think we get a little lazy and we just start staging the gliders wherever. Most of the time it's okay because we got the Pawnees, but I encourage everyone to back it up as far as you can. There's no reason not to. We don't need to be bouncing in the grass at the end, especially on high density altitude days. We don't talk a lot about that, but it's a real thing. We do get tailwinds up here. We only take off in one direction, so that adds to it. And of course, the Super Cub isn't as powerful, so that really is affected by these things. So think about that. Just push them back as far as we can and stage the ones on deck off to the side. Be ready to go on a busy day. We try to turn them around pretty quick, especially if we got commercial rides. Nothing more frustrating than a 233 waiting there when no one knows where the adapter is. So, we have to shut the plane down because we don't want to burn gas. We're looking in every golf cart and everywhere around. So just kind of look ahead if you know you're going to fly it, where it is, and have it ready to go. Get your pre-takeoff checklist ready. Get all that prepared. Again, when you sit in there and the canopy closed, be ready to go. I suggest a sterile cockpit. Once you waggle that rudder until you release, really pay attention. That's the time to stay focused. We talked about that a lot, the distractions. Just try to minimize that. If you're giving your friends a ride, just say, stop talking until I tell you it's okay. Just again, so you can stay focused. Okay, so now we're rolling. All right, so mentally you should be thinking about what your emergency plan is. Again, it's that mental preparation. What happens if, run those scenarios through your mind. As Joe showed, a lot of the accident stuff, right? So maintain directional control. We get crosswinds and funny winds up here. When you're on the ground roll, do your best to stay behind that tow plane. Lift off when the sailplane's ready, but again, maintain directional control. Not only side to side, but vertically as well. It's okay to stay in ground effect, but you got to watch out you don't get too high. We call it kiting. And really, once we leave the ground, we start formation flying. It really is a form of formation flying. And for the next several minutes, we literally have a lifeline between you and the tow plane. Our safety is in each other's hands. So keep that in mind. It's not just you back there. Okay, up, and away. So maintain proper tow position. So here at the hill, we get a pretty interesting phenomenon sometimes. As soon as we break the brow of that hill, we get this zoom effect, depending on which way the wind comes. So be ready for that. Again, that's for new pilots, that's a kind of a fun one when they start chasing the tow plane and getting out of position, and it gets a little dicey sometimes. So kind of be mentally ready for that. And again, that's one of those things to discuss with a tow pilot when you show up is, how the conditions. So again, follow the tow plane. So 9 times out of 10, we hang a left once we break the brow of the hill. But there may be a time we need to go right because there's other traffic coming in we didn't see when we were taking off. So the tow plane should be looking for that. So don't be surprised, like, whoa, why are we going to the right? So that does happen. The tow plane might move slightly to the right before turning left. I like to do that because it provides a less aggressive turn back to the airport in case you have a premature rope break. You don't have to do a more than 270 turn. So I kind of sneak over to the right a little bit more. So be ready for that. Mike alluded to this earlier. So make small corrections, not major corrections. We can feel you back there. I mean, we can feel you jerking us around. Some people have names for that, but well, we can feel you. I'll just leave it at that. Just as a courtesy, any maneuvering you guys are planning to do with the CFI or just practicing, let us know before you launch. If you're going to do rope break stuff, because that one always gets me because I don't want to reel the rope back up if it did break, because then it gets caught in the plane. If you're going to box the wake and you start disappearing, I feel those weird yanks. I know something's not wrong. You're actually doing something you're supposed to be doing. Same with slackline practice. If all of a sudden I see you come whipping up beside me, I'm like, what is going on? And I got my hand on the release. So if I know what you're doing ahead of time, it just keeps me from getting too excited. CFIs are probably gonna hate me. Forget the flight signals in flight. We can't see you back there, especially on bumpy days. So this, waggle to speed up and, slow down and turn me left, turn me right. Can't feel it. So, or we can't tell. So just use the radio for a request. Hey, give me 5 more knots. Hey, all of a sudden I'm going to box the wake, whatever. But we can't see. We have these little tiny mirrors. You guys are in and out of it constantly. So more use for the radio. Okay, parting our ways. It's not you, it's me. Wait, no, it is you, not me. I guess you're the ones that release. So yeah, you guys are leaving me. Okay, when do we do this? So if the tow plane rocks or swings whatsoever, immediately release. No questions asked. Should be a reflex. Something's wrong. Just get out of there. Sometimes, my experience, new folks, when you start doing the pull up to the right, sometimes you don't release before you do that. So I can feel it, and again, gets my attention when you feel that, and it obviously stresses the mechanisms. And just again gets us wondering what's going on back there. The tow plane will likely keep going straight for a few seconds. We don't dive immediately for a couple reasons. One, I want to make sure you really released. I don't want to start diving away and have you still attached. So I like to see the little snaky rope and then see you peel off, and then I dive down. And also I like to give one more look before I start diving down on top of somebody else. So again, don't, freak out if you see us going straight still. I encourage you to look for other traffic before you release. We typically drop everyone near the same spot. especially on a good day and we know where thermals are. So again, someone might be loitering around out there. It's easy to lose count and who is all up there. So just, take a quick look before you start peeling off and doing aggressive maneuvers. When you're coming in on downwind, sometimes the tow plane might be in there downwind too, and all of a sudden you're facing each other. And I've had some people kind of fussing at me, and we'll get out of your way. You guys keep going, do what you're going to do. We have the engine. We can go do some stuff. So, if you see that, we're going to see you. Again, if you have a radio, we can say, hey, I'm on, turning base. Do you see me? And we'll peel out. So again, don't panic. You have the right of way. After landing, make sure the tow pilot isn't on short final before you start pulling the golf cart out and walking across. Typically, we're trying to get back down and get the next ride going. So, just take a quick look before you cross the path. Okay, so something to consider. Let's assume, and again, this is a big assumption. So we're towing a 21, approximately 70 miles an hour. It's about 100 feet per second. Tow rope length's about 200 feet, give or take. So all of a sudden, the tow plane engine quits. So I just assumed it decelerates to about 55, starting to stall maybe. So just with that snapshot in time, that's about 10 seconds before that sailplane will close that 200 feet. So let's think about what's going on. So we talked about complacency, contest pilots, seasoned pilots. It's my 1000th tow. I'm happily looking out the window. It's a beautiful day. The leaves are out, not even knowing what's going on. So it'd probably take about 3 seconds for you to look back and say like, whoa, what's going on? Now you probably have a real quick pucker moment of why all of a sudden this tow plane is getting big in my windshield. So that'll probably take a few seconds to just sort through all that and figure out, what you're looking at. So basically the point is you don't have a lot of time to determine a course of action, right? You got to kind of maybe less than 5 seconds to figure it out. And again, this is not the time to figure out what you're going to do the first time, right? You should have maybe thought through this and talked through this a few times. Always have a plan ready to go at a moment's notice. You never know. 200 feet off, 2,200 feet off the ground, something can happen. So always think about that. Again, the sterile cockpit will help. You can stay focused, but you can sightsee later after you're off tow, but just be prepared for that. All right, some more things to consider here. In a little research I did, the highest percent of tow plane accidents are a result of a thing called kiting. And I'm going to get into a little demonstration on that to show just how serious that is. So put this into perspective. There's a video I'd like to share. All right, Mike, if you could please get the volume on. So it's about 10 minutes long, so sit back, relax, get another beer. Yeah, just to get like 24 seconds or 24 minutes.
This is the one you want.
Yeah. So while he's pulling that up, this is actually from the Soaring Society of America. It was a webinar I did on, it's called the Zen and Art of Aero Towing. So this is just a little excerpt from that. It was very relevant, I thought.
Those of you on Zoom, please. Those of you on Zoom, please mute your mic so we can hear you.
Maybe it'll do this.
No, they're not.
Oh, this might be the video. This might be the video.
Oh, really?
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Okay. So this little typewritten document.
Can everybody hear that okay?
Schweitzer flight data.
Oh, you're gonna be standing there for 10 minutes.
And if we talk about air speeds and pounds of lift being generated as a function of, in this case, a fixed angle of attack on the ground and a change in wind speed, what I wanted you to be able to see was that at 60 miles an hour, the airplane can manufacture 2,900 pounds of lift. And at 70 miles an hour, the machine can generate more than 3,900 pounds of lift. this is on an airplane that has a gross weight of about 1,000 pounds. So just think about the difference of lift generation and where that force is going to go if we see a 10 mph, not even 10 knots, increase in airspeed. Okay, come on, baby. Go. For typical tow planes used in the United States, they have a gross weight of somewhere between 2,000 and 2,400 pounds if they were being used for spraying or dusting. If it's a 182 or a Pawnee, its fuselage length is, give or take, 25 feet. We said we were going to talk about the aerodynamics. Now, for some of my discerning observers, this is a radio controlled model, but it was the best Pawnee side view I could find. Okay, so no, this tow plane isn't smoking hugely. It's a model, but it lets us talk about the aerodynamics associated with towing. We'd like to remember that this teeter-totter that we call an airplane is suspended by its center of lift, or is carried or pivots around its center of lift. The center of gravity for this machine is forward of the center of lift to give us good stall recovery properties. To balance the teeter-totter in flight, the elevator force, coupled with the horizontal tail, has to be downward in flight to balance all of that big Lycoming steel up front with all of those tail feathers in the back and make this teeter-totter stay level or climb or gently descend. I'm just going over this because some folks either neither got it in their initial training or, like me, gosh, if that was more than 40 years ago, do I really remember which way the tail force has to work in regular flight? Now we'll go back to the idea that we took out of that Schweitzer handbook, and we'll say, oh my gosh, I'm going to give you a big, long, 200-foot pry bar. Some of you have had to take lug nuts off of an old dried up trailer rim on the freeway on the interstate somewhere and had to get a long breaker bar to use enough leverage to break that nut loose on your wheel rims. Well, here's our long green breaker bar that we're using as a fulcrum on the tail of the tow plane. And we can generate an up force, as we just saw out of a Schweitzer manual, easily 2,000 pounds, easily 3,000 pounds. And yet the gross weight of that Pawnee was significantly under these numbers. So with this big, long 200-foot lever arm, we can make some up force that's huge by comparison. How long does it take us to create that levering action? How long does it take us as we're traveling down a runway on departure roll or on departure heading at 80 or 100 feet in the air? How long does it take us to lose sight of a tow plane? And what I want you to watch in the animations that come along is, when do the wheels come up separate from the shadow of the tow plane? So when is he off the ground? When does he move below the horizon line? And how much time, count seconds, from when he moves below the horizon line until you lose sight of the tow plane? He's off the ground. Climbs. Wow.
That's scary.
Condor, an excellent training tool. We're gonna try that again. He starts to climb. We stick with him. We look at something out the side. Where'd he go? Oh, let me see. Button. If we change view, and instead of being in the cockpit, if we are a bystander along the runway, and we watch a similar takeoff, how long from initial movement in the air by the glider pilot, how long until he is out of control? The other things I would like you to notice in this particular frame, and we'll run it a couple of times, we have in the bottom margin of the screen the airspeed of the glider, the altitude of the airport, very close to the center of the frame. The altitude of this particular simulation, the elevation of the field is, we'll say 600 feet. And we'll watch speed and altitude, and we'll say, how much time, how many seconds before this particular pilot is out of control? The glider's flying 50 knots, 615 feet, 64 knots, 65, 68, 73, and 732 feet of altitude. Bruno, did you count seconds?
It was pretty quick.
Oh my. We'll do it again. Airplane's flying. 1, 1,000. 2, 1,000. 3, 1,000.
6 seconds.
Yeah, that's from breaking ground to 130 feet of altitude. 6 seconds. Wow. This is a sequence of photographs that is part of the NTSB preliminary report from the Byron accident. Take a look at the timestamps in the left columns. 42 seconds, 46 seconds, 48 seconds. In the top picture, both the tow plane and the glider are off the ground. You can use the visual size of the tow plane. We know that his span is about 35 feet. If we turn that span vertically, we can count how many spans that airplane might be above the ground. I think you guys will see my cursor in the middle of this picture. We can say if this is the span of the tow plane, how many intervals of span above the ground might he be in the second picture? 3, maybe 4 spans, less than 100 feet. And how much time interval changes between picture number 2 and picture number 3? There's 2 seconds interval between the pictures. And the glider has changed from a slightly maybe low moment behind the tow plane, but it looks like he has a pitched up attitude. And in 2 seconds time, his span is nearly double, or his altitude is nearly double what the tow plane's altitude is above the earth. Now you've got a little bit of visual error because he's a little closer to us than the tow plane is. But even factoring that in 2 seconds time, he has changed position so dramatically There's no way he can see the tow pilot. And my guess is in the next frame, the tow pilot would be attacking the Earth. With that, a lot of
On the other one? Or you want to narrate?
Yeah, so again, that was an SSA video, and I encourage you all to watch it. It's on their website. But I like this video as well because this actually shows all the way to the end. The other ones didn't show actually what happened to the tow plane, and certainly the real photo didn't want to show them hitting the ground. But again, this was another good illustration of how things can go wrong very, very quickly. And that's where things go bad. So thanks, Mike. We can just go back to the. Okay, so that lady that was talking, she brought up a good point about how, you know, the CFIs instruct, if you lose sight of the tow plane, just release. Her point is never lose sight of the tow plane. That should be the objective, not when to release or how far do I release before I see it. Never lose sight of it. Usually the reasons for losing sight of it are probably human error. So again, sterile cockpit, you know, and just concentrate on what you're doing, because again, it's not just your life in your hands, it's a couple people. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, have fun, fly safe. That's all I had.
So Joe? Sean's up? There you go. Which end? You end up. Slides, since you're right up here anyway.
All right, everybody ready? Hang in there. This one will take real long. Yes, sir.
I know my own pet peeve with co-pilot is that when you got the guy hooking up the phone line and hooked up and the exit, make sure that nobody lifts the wing of the wing on it or whatever. Make sure nobody is lifting the wing of that tow plane or doing it else. You got people that are in front of that sailplane. Sometimes that tow rope snags back here, got the overrun or whatever, it catches, and you start pulling that glider forward, and you're only about 30 or 40 feet away from the glider. And it can seriously hurt somebody if they're, if they got get hit in the side of the knee with the wing or something like that. So make sure the area in front of that glider. So I won't start casting if I don't see it clear. But as I say, it's kind of hard to see what through the rear view mirror exactly what you got. Make sure you're not getting in front of that sailplane and that tow plane is casting out. It's not a safe place.
Okay, for those on Zoom, he's just pointing out the fact, the danger of lurching, the tow plane lurching and snagging the rope and lurching that wing forward. So don't lift the wing until everyone's clear of the aircraft. What I'm here to talk about today is this. I haven't heard this covered specifically before. The dangers of a landing site that's surrounded by trees. And that may be an airport. So the airport on the left is right in Corning. It's right by Corning Community College, and it has very tall trees around it. Okay, so 134 stretches a little too far away from home, could easily find themselves landed in that airport. And then the field on the right one we're going to talk more about today is a field out by Cameron, New York. Just a random field I picked off of Google Maps. And the Google Earth image doesn't really do justice to the trees. So we're going to say that the trees are 75 feet tall, which is probably true in this neck of the woods. And we've got some wind today. And just let's get involved here, point out some potential issues we might encounter as we get low on cross-country flight in this case and have to land in this field. Anybody? Little help? Well, we got some wind, about 14 knots, and we got the tall trees. Okay, so the first one that I'm familiar with is probably the last one I might come to your mind. So, okay, first of all, let me say this. The reason for this presentation is I see some things here at Harris Hill that don't translate to good soaring other places, good flying other places. A lot of things are good here. The fact that we have a short field and we have all these different wind conditions, for example, makes for some really good pilots. But I see some people taking liberties with the turn to final low off the front of the hill. We have 700 feet below, and that would look a lot lower if there was flat terrain out there. So I see some bad habits develop there. People coming in with 75 feet and turning on to final. So take that into this scenario that we've created. Okay, one of the things that people don't think about is you can't see into a field that's lined with trees. You can't see the surface. So as we approach this field from the side like this, and we say, okay, that's going to be our landing spot. That's our safety field we're going to go to. We're going to execute a good off-field lane in there. If the trees are high around it and you don't get up close to it to really look it over, the trees will shield what's in that field. Okay, so the correction is you didn't fly a full pattern, or you fly your pattern too wide. Another thing that can happen is you have that field in your back pocket and you start to look for lift to get out of there. And you're focused on lift and you're doing a search pattern for lift and you're too wide. Okay, the solution is to fly a full pattern, as I kind of squiggly line drew. The upwind leg should be very close to the field so you can look right down into it. You're looking for slope, wires, fences. Then you can go ahead with a crosswind leg and a normal downwind leg that's spaced just like you do it here at Harris Hill, and make everything look normal and know what you're getting into. So the first thing comes up with a field that's lined with trees, not being able to see what you're going to land on, okay, which is one of the reasons we do a pattern. And then we talk about the wind. We talk about scenario number one. We've got this wind shadow that develops in this field. And look at the odd shape of this field. The wind is blowing left to right primarily, and we're going to land right to left into the wind. And what's going to happen in this field? Anybody can help me out with that one? Yes, you'll have a rotor coming off the trees, and you've got the wind blowing across that wide field into the narrower part, and it's got no place to go. And so those tall trees are going to form a stagnant area of wind there. The reverse can happen. We have a line of trees blocking the wind, and it'll be stagnant behind it. You'll have this dead area and the severe wind gradient as you descend down below treetop level. Okay, so scenario number one here. Poor guy gets a little low on his downwind leg. So he does what looks normal to him, Harris Hill pattern, bad habits, and he gets low, and he's going to set himself up for a lowish final. And there he is, about 120 feet over 75-foot trees. And then he goes into that narrow section on a base leg and has to execute base to final turn inside the trees. So he ducks over the first trees into the clear area. And now the trees on the other side are coming up because he set himself up on this sharp base to final turn. Has to bank to avoid the trees on the other side. So he does a nice steep turn. However, he loses 14 knots of airspeed because he's descending into the wind shadow at the same time. The airplane does an accelerated stall and falls down on its wingtip. He crashes on the far tree line. Seen it happen at Perry. Okay, scenario number one. Scenario number two, this guy sets himself still low, still kind of blows it, and sets himself up on a low base leg. And this time he's out over the trees, And he's not even sure he's going to make it into the field. He's scared to bank enough because he's within wingspan of the treetops. Afraid he's going to cartwheel into the treetops. So he rudders it around. And that's our cross control stall that we demonstrate to y'all. Okay. So he cross control stalled right into the treetops. Okay. So that's no good. Let's talk about what we should do differently. Solution is a 200-foot stabilized approach. Touchdown spot well into the field. Why mess with that little narrow area in there at all? It's a huge field. Glider's going to roll about 2 fuselage lengths when you touch down into this thing. It's not a very good surface, by the way. I'd pick a different field. But say this is a field we had on the Google Earth. So that's better planning. That's how it should look. And I'll just say one other thing. Sometimes you're tired and you're doing this maneuver and you do make mistakes. So this is still acceptable. This is the guy who was lowish as he was on his base leg. He had kind of blown his planning. But instead of going and squaring that up into that narrow area of the field where the wind shadow is, turn early and do a 200-foot stabilized approach, still into that kind of diagonal wind, get into that landable area, and then just do a baby turn to align yourself with the field. So set yourself up for a very gentle turn to align yourself up with those plowed rows or whatever you're looking at in that field, the lengthwise of the field. So again, he touched down, or she touched down well into the field. Any questions on those scenarios there? Okay. That's it. Next. Thanks.
Just get rid of this. Go ahead.
What?
Yep.
Yep. So we're in the end game here. Before I forget it, I think we owe a round of applause to Joni for setting all this up tonight. Thanks, Joni. Thanks for giving her a kiss, Heinz. And I'd also like to thank Mike for his presentation. You know, I thought that was pretty darn good. I mean, he's only been at this 4, 5, 6 months. So I think he needs another round of applause. Also setting all this up. You know, oftentimes we don't hear it from the tow pilot's perspective, but Patrick did a great job. Thanks, Patrick. And Sean, always good. I learn something every time you give a pitch. So thank you. So I kind of, you know, looked around the web to see how we could kind of wrap up tonight. And I actually found this Glider Aviators Model Code of Conduct. That's supposed to be of, not or. Code or conduct on the Soaring Safety Foundation. And it was actually put together in 2007. And it's a lengthy code. It was put together by some really experienced glider pilots who felt we needed a code, but you know, it's not a code, you know, we sell to the entire glider community. It's really a code you have to accept yourself. And there's pieces of it I think it may ring true to you. And I think there's 7 different sections in this code of conduct. I picked 3 kind of areas I thought we could cover quickly tonight in 16 minutes or less. And so next slide, please. Oops, I guess that's me. Yeah. Oh, geez. Give me that.
What'd you do to this?
I don't know.
Oh,
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Hang on a second. These two buttons.
Yeah. Hey, always training, man. So kind of general responsibilities, and this does not have to be one way, by the way, but so what should we do as pilots in a code of conduct? What should we accept from ourselves? And this is a safety meeting, so we probably ought to make safety our number one priority. I mean, we ought to make it for ourselves. We ought to make it for our families. We ought to make it for our club, because we have a responsibility to not only to ourselves, but everyone else. We ought to seek excellence in airmanship. We strive to be professional pilots, and we seek to be better every time. We always want to develop, exercise good judgment. Good judgment is something we all strive for, and then sound principles to aeronautical decision making. And every time we're up here at Harris Hill, we're making decisions, whether you're hooking up sailplanes or you're the tow pilot or you're the glider pilot. A lot of decision making going on. And obviously, we're always managing risks. Is it a hot day? Is it a windy day? Am I tired today? Am I feeling not quite right? Patrick mentioned the "I'm safe," mantra. It behooves all of us kind of to go through that every time we go fly. We all strive for situational awareness. Many of us are always looking for it, but so we want prudent operating practices, standard operating procedures, and then personal operating parameters. And that "I'm safe" is you establishing personal operating parameters. Am I really ready to go fly today? Again, I mentioned professionalism, acting with responsibility and courtesy to others, courtesy to those that are paying us to go fly them. And then obviously applicable laws and regulations. I thought this was a particular good part of this code of conduct because many of you out there are commercial pilots, and we're getting ready to ramp up our passenger season, okay? And we need to remember passenger safety first. I mean, from the time, the cash person signs them in, and by the way, the cash person is our first person they meet here at Harris Hill. And they kind of establish the safety rhythm going on, where they can go, where they can't go, stay inside the cones, don't go out on the runway. If you got a dog, please put it back in the car. If you have little children, they need to be attended to. We try to manage risks and avoid unnecessary risks to the passengers. When they're out there on the runway, they're a fish out of water. They really don't know what to do. And it's up to us, both as hooking up the sailplane folks to the commercial pilot to the towplane pilot. These people's lives, in one sense, are in our hands. We want to make sure we brief the passengers on planned flight procedures. Hopefully you have a quick checklist you go through to brief the passenger so they're not surprised by what you're going to do. And then any significant or unusual risk associated with the flight, and hopefully low risks, and we're managing the risks. And then it goes without saying, we got to seek to prevent unsafe conduct by the passengers. It's the family. Sometimes we're concerned about rushing out there to see, the person who just landed so they can get a picture, or the child who doesn't know they can't go running out on the runway. We're all responsible for that. And then lastly, avoiding operations that may alarm or disturb the passengers or people on the surface. Maybe driving too fast in the golf cart. Maybe doing donuts in the golf cart, right? Probably not good, okay? Sometimes when the tow plane comes in, the refuel, we want to make sure the passengers are clearly out of the way. So when the tow plane rotates, they don't get hit by flying rocks or debris. But again, it takes all of us to recognize these risks and minimize them. And then training and proficiency. We're all going to be training throughout the year. We're all going to be trying to improve our proficiency. I encourage you all to participate in training. Mike said, it's just not about flying. It's also books, reading and correlating the two together in improving our proficiency. Participate in safety education programs. I can't emphasize enough the WINGS program. If you're not familiar with WINGS, come see me afterwards. But being part of that whole WINGS program and participating and getting credits and continual training is just part of being a professional. We all got to be vigilant and avoid complacency. It's that gorgeous summer day. There's a 5-knot breeze coming down the runway. The thermals are to 6,000 feet. And that's the day to watch out. Okay. Because you're going to be complacent. You're going to think this is just one of them easy days. And that's when the hair on the back of your neck starts going up and go, man, I got to be vigilant here today. Make sure what I'm doing. And then for commercial pilots, actively log hours flown and maneuvers practice to satisfy your training and currency requirements. Yeah, it's true. You don't have to log every flight, but you got to log flights to be able to show your currency and that you're authorized to take passengers up like we do. So that's kind of the end of the presentation tonight. I'd like to open it up for any questions people may have. I appreciate your attention. I think I'm happy with the way it went. We got a good thing going here. We got some great things going on. I think, Mark, you got buff and wax again tomorrow.
So far, I got 3 volunteers. 2 of them are sitting here and 1 sitting there. So anybody that would like to come tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock and give us a hand, we would greatly appreciate it.
And you got 2 more to do, right?
2 more.
Okay. Okay, great. And then next weekend, Dave?
Next weekend is the Sunday breakfast in our shop. And so I would appreciate that anybody who's going to send an email so I have a number to work with. So when I go grocery shopping next Friday, I know how many eggs to get. Whether I get a dozen eggs or 6 and sausage and other stuff. So if you're coming and you're bringing guests, let me know so I know what to get.
So depending on the weather, we will try to fly. I mean, we got 2 sailplanes that'll be ready to go. I mean, it's not quite April 1st yet, but if it's flyable, we'll be flying. And then the following weekend is start of operations. So we'll have crews ready to go Saturday and Sunday. Joni?
So we have Region 3 coming up July 16th practice day, July 17th. So get on the SSA website and sign up, please. So far we only have Sean, John Seymour, and Greg Wesley, and then we've got a couple.
Okay, juniors, you guys got anything over there? Pretty quiet from the junior section tonight. A little worried. They were attentive. Ken? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Doug Harshbarger meant to be here tonight. He's had some things he's had to attend to. So we did have a discussion at the board meeting. Everyone knows fuel prices are going up. We are going to adjust our passenger prices for the summer. And we will probably have an increase in what we have to pay for a flight, basically for a tow. And the numbers are being crunched. My gut, it could be $3, $4, $5. We're not quite sure. We'll crunch it, try to keep it to where we're not making additional money. We just got to make up for the increase in fuel costs. So.
And then you're going to email that out to.
Yep, as soon as we run the numbers and get it out, we'll make sure that gets emailed out. Yeah, thank you. Patrick?
Sign up in humanity.
Yeah, humanity. April's coming up. We need folks for cash, log, commercial, CFI, tow. Okay. Okay, anybody? Corky?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing, because I've been listening to all this tonight, and very good. But one thing Mike brought up is, how long does it take to learn to fly? Don't plan on doing it in a few days, or a few months, or a few years. You might get so low, you might even get your license, you might even upgrade your license, but you're still learning. And then I've been at it since 1946. I'm still learning. So it takes a lifetime to really learn how to fly.
Well said. Thank you, Corky. Okay, everybody. Good night. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to end our session. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.